Hello, this is Joy Hancox again, introducing video 11. I can hardly believe that we've covered as many as those beforehand, but I think today we must introduce a map to show you the areas that we've covered so far on our journey. And this is London, Manchester, Salford, Stonehenge, and Tintern in Wales. And so, if you've seen that, you will be able to, if you like, understand some of the areas that have taken me on my journey thus far. And now I would like to remind you that in video 10, I was introducing the allegory of 1804, and we were concentrating on Jean Cocteau. And if you recall, I did comment on my visit to Shugborough, where I was introduced to the three holies, Bagenly and Lincoln. Lincoln wasn't actually physically there, and so I did meet Michael Bagent and Richard Lee. And this was in conjunction and connection with Charles Ratcliffe. Charles Ratcliffe was a Grand Master listed in the Grand Masters of the Holy Blood and the Holy Grail, dating back to the 1100s and finishing with Jean Cocteau, who took up the Grand Mastership in 1918. Now, really, what I did not say, and this is where I'm starting today, I'm starting with this fact, because I did not say in video 10 that Charles Ratcliffe had another connection with the Byrom projects. And I had not said that Charles Ratcliffe, who was executed in 1746, he was executed at the same session as Tom Siddle, that was resident in my home here, from a tenant from 1729 till 1745, when he was arrested. And he was executed at the same time, at the same session as Charles Ratcliffe. Now, I did not mention it in video 10 because I wanted to save that until today, in today's recording. I needed to save this part of the story because I wanted to make a point of it, because I think it's absolutely extraordinary. It's another extraordinary coincidence, or call it what you will. Charles Ratcliffe, he was the son of the Earl of Derwentwater, which is in, of course, the Lake District. But his mother was Mary Tudor, and she was the illegitimate daughter of King Charles II by Mary Davis. And Charles Radcliffe's mother became absolutely fascinating to me. Why? Because Charles Radcliffe's father died, and his mother, I discovered, married a Captain James Rooke from St Bravils, which is 4 miles from Tinton. Can you believe it? There is Charles Radcliffe, and who's become another part of the story which I did not expect. His mother married a Captain Rooke, and the Rooke family are very prestigious family who inhabited St Bravils for a number of years. I knew nothing about Captain Rooke. Why should I? But the interesting thing is that Charles Radcliffe's mother moved and was in the same area as all these fascinating incidents that are happening in connection with Tinton. I've also saved this part of the story until today. Tinton became an absolute fascination for me with my research program. I did not tell anybody for a long time that my heritage is based in Tinton. My paternal heritage is based in Tinton. My grandfather, Edward Young, sent his 3 sons to the Duke of Beaufort's forestry school, and my grandmother was the organist in the churches for 40 years. And so my links with Tinton go back centuries. In fact, I have to say this, that my great-great-grandfather was a salmon fisherman in the River Wye. And I have a family story recorded where my father and grandfather found bronze tools at Leavox Farm, which was owned by, connected with the abbey itself, and they found these bronze tools that go back, to the origins actually, and they're now in Cardiff Museum, courtesy of my grandfather and father. So my connections with Tinton run very, very deep. And I did not tell anybody of my connection for a very long time, because I did not want them to think that I was carrying out my researches because of my family connections with them. Most of my parents, my father's family, in his heritage, buried in the Trellick Church of St Nicholas. Having said that, can we go back to Charles Radcliffe's mother? She died in 1726, actually in Paris. So she must have had links with Paris, apart from her living with Mr. Rooke in St Bravils. And incidentally, I have got other connections with St Bravils, which I need to discuss with the viewer now, because Mary Tudor Rourke died in 1726. Charles Ratcliffe took over as Grand Master in his list in 1727. Now that was the year that George II became king. So here we have Charles Ratcliffe taking over as Grand Master, according to this list, in the year that George II became king. But incidentally, I have to remind the viewer that John Byrom himself had a liaison, an affair, or call it what you will, with the Princess of Wales, who obviously, as George II's wife, became Queen of England. And that is a fact. So these dates and these connections seem to suggest that something was taking place apart from what seemed to be obvious. There's an intimacy here that seems to show that there are connections with Manchester, the Lake District, and with Tintern itself, or St Brambles. And I was taken to the church in St Brambles by Mary and Jim Simpson, who were able to tell me that they had got married there in that church in St Brambles themselves. And they are very closely connected with my research in Tintern, living near where my family inheritance was settled. And Jim Simpson, of course, wrote he was called the Riverman, really, I call him fondly. There was nothing about the River Wye that he did not know, present and past. And he wrote a particular article for me in the Messenger book. So here we have me visiting the St Brambles Church with them, because that was where they got married. So that's a sentimental touch that really is part of my unfolding of this story. And now I'm going to introduce another connection with St Brambles. And this is, I think I can say at this stage that I doubt that there are many other people that can pick up the threads that I am able to do. And these incidents may have been lost to time and forgotten about historically. The only reason why I am able to do this, and I've introduced my own family connections, which I did not really intend to do, to show that anybody can unfold a most wonderful story if they take the time and the trouble to do so. It all started with the installation of central heating, and then we discovered, or I looked into it, that there were buildings or rooms underneath the house that we did not know existed. They were not part of there was no access to them within the house as it stood. We had to investigate and go into walls and all kinds of things to investigate what was underneath the breakfast room in the first instance, and that was where the engineers had found steps going to a bricked up wall. So it's all a fascinating beginning based on an innocent purchase of a house as a townhouse, which turned out to be the estate farm of a very prestigious family in the Manchester area. So now I have to pop back in my story to St. Breville's, because here I am talking to you about Charles Ratcliffe's mother marrying James Rooke of St. Breville's, and here is now another part of the connection that I discovered thereafter. I have to mention that quite independently, I had had archaeology and radar work carried out in St. Michael's Church, Tinton Parva to be precise, in Tinton, over a period of time. And actually, I'm going to mention now that something that was quite startling that cropped up during those investigations. St. Michael's Church has a boundary wall in the graveyard which abuts onto the wharf leading to the River Wye. And in that wall, it was discovered, or I noted, and I discussed it very carefully with Neville Barker Cryer, there was a keystone in the wall. And behind that wall, we have the graveyard, and Neville Barker Cryer was very interested in this keystone, because he was able to tell me that biblically, or from his own experience of his knowledge into biblical affairs to do with Freemasonry and whatever, he was able to say that behind a keystone there was usually buried or registered manuscripts of, or paperwork of a high order. And that is what he suggested to me, that there must be something of significance connected with that keystone. And behind the keystone, as described by Neville Barker Cryer, he felt that behind that stone there would be matters of some interest in the way of burials. And it was after he said that to me that I really started to look behind the wall of the graveyard. And covered in grass at that time, we uncovered, were able to uncover a stone, and I'm going to have to read this. In fact, the stone was the gravestone of Anne Watkins, aged 33 years. And I then investigated the entry into the burials and found that she had been buried on her funeral day was the 39th of May 1843. Well, I looked at it very hard because I wondered whether I was imagining it, because there isn't a 39th of May. And when I queried it with the then vicar of the church, he said to me, that's a code. There is something amiss there, because there, as you say, there is no 39th of May. So that is a matter of record for Anne Watkins. And so I then, she became a matter of interest for me, because I discovered that she was married to a William Watkins, a Mason, and they were married at St. Breville's Church. Now, St. Breville's is actually in Gloucestershire, and here St. Michael's is in Monmouthshire, and the distance between St. Breville's and Tinton is about 4 miles. So really, how come she was buried in St Michael's Church? Because she seemed to have roots in St Bravils. That's where she was married. And of course, what I then discovered is that there was a lot of work being carried on in the 1840s for alterations with the Church of St Michael's. And this became a feature that of great interest to me, because as Neville Barker Cryer said, that usually behind such a war and commitment, there is usually some burial of significance in the form of papers. So have we here a mystery that is something that needs to be examined further? As Neville Barker Cryer said, that there is some kind of mystery connected with this wall and the keystone and this burial of Anne Watkins, and on the 39th of May. And as I've just said, there was work being carried out for alterations with St Michael's at that time. And may I just remind the viewer that it is said that, and I record it in my books, that Bacon's surrogate mother, or stand-in mother, Anne Bacon, translated the 39 articles that had been introduced into the church, and she had translated them from Latin, and is said by my earlier radar man, Dr. Bill McCann, that I think that she is buried in the Elizabethan section that was added in the south porch of St Michael's during the Elizabethan period. And we know that there is a burial there, and I think that it is, I've said so in my books, that it's Anne Bacon. So she is connected with the 39 articles, and so here we have a burial in another part of the churchyard that is said to be on the 39th of May. And I think that there is a connection between all of them, and I think that the position of it at the head of the wharf, and it's near what I would call the neck of the wharf, the commemorative stone for Francis Bacon is further down the line, and we will show you a photograph of that so that you can see the position of it. To finish this little section off, can I just say that when the mother of Charles Ratcliffe died in 1726, she was buried in Paris, as I've said, but her widower husband then married a member of the Catchmay family and had several children, and the Catchmay people were based in, and some of them were based and attached to the Nurtons in Tinton. So there is yet another connection with all of these strings that I've been putting together. So that's the scenario surrounding Charles Ratcliffe, my Tom Siddle in Manchester here, in the Manchester residence in which I live, the connections with all of that, and also my family inheritance of named people. I don't. There's nobody living there now of my generation, but the hereditary connections with me are very, very strong. And now for another surprise. A family member by the name of Madeline, knowing how interested I was in the Tinton area, obviously, because the family I'd worked on it for years and years and years, my research that is, and so she presented me and came to see me one day in Manchester, and she brought with her a sketch. And when I looked at the sketch, she said, "We want you to have this because it's by somebody called L.L. Raze, and it's obviously a sketch of Tinton in some way. And it's dated 1850. And so I was very grateful to have it. It looked like a working drawing, pencil and rulers, and there were rulers. It seemed to me not a finished product. It seemed to be partly in its working stage, but it was very clear that his signature stated that it was done in 1850, and it was of Tinton. Now, I did not recognize the area at all. It was of a quay in some way. There was water nearby. But anyway, I took it down with me to Tinton and showed it to the Elsa and Adrian Wood of the Nertons. And they recognized it instantly and took me to the place where it was, and much altered now, by the way. It was situated by the side of the Tinton Abbey itself. And I was absolutely fascinated to have this. Why? Because I recognise the name of Louis Laurent Raze, particularly the name Raze, as a founder member or as a very important figure in the history of Rennes-le-Château. And I could not identify him immediately with that, of course, but it was such an unusual name that I was able to, using Ancestry.com, I was able to trace his family. He was the son of a dyer, Philippe, and his mother's maiden name was Jesu. And was able to trace it back and back and back, and he is and was a member of the original Raze, very prestigious family in France. And so why was he here? Why was he in Tinton in 1850? Raze was born in 1804, and that was the date of the installation of Napoleon, and what we were talking about in the previous video, the allegory 1804. And here is our Raze, new Raze, born in that year. And it appears that in 1823, at the age of 18-19, he came to England as an artist and a draftsman. And then in 1843, he was appointed to be the art master at St. John's in Cambridge. and he married somebody, an English girl, and they had 2 daughters. And the one of the daughters, whose name was Angelina, settled in France because she married a member of the Duran family. And I've traced the records of these people, and it seems that though they may well have worked near or in association with craftsmanship associated with St. Denis's church in Paris, outside Paris. So here we have a member of the Razé family visiting Tintern and sketching Tintern. It is a working drawing, I know that. And here he was in 1850 in Tintern. Now, why was he there then? I can only use my imagination. I think it was in association with the work that had been carried out at St. Michael's Church in its alteration stages. By 1850 it was completed. And so for Razé to be here in Tintern, it's got to be in association with the records that I'm putting together that shows a connection with the Rennes-le-Château story, because the Razé family is very much part of all that. And now, as a climax to this particular program, I'm going to talk about yet another book that was drawn to my attention. I did not know anything about it. I was so busy at the time, and having published my hidden chapter, this book was published a few months later. And it was drawn to my attention for a particular reason. And it's called Inside the Priory of Zion. And it's written by Robert Howells, and he was the manager of a bookshop, a very famous bookshop in London called Watkins. And he had now, by this time, I think, left the Watkins shop, and he prepared this volume called Inside the Priory of Zion. And when I wondered why it had been sent to me. It didn't take me long to find something of interest to me. I looked at the index actually, and I saw my name there on page 46. And when I turned to page 46, what did I find? But I'm going to read you some of the entry from this page. It says, quote, "There is another interesting link. Some of those on the original published list, including Robert Flood, Johann Valentin Andrea, Robert Boyle, Isaac Newton, and Charles Radcliffe, had all either influenced or directly contributed to what became the Byrom collection papers." Now, what I should say, that this book was following an inquiry post the Priory of Zion book. And actually what they were doing was investigating the provenance of some of the sources that they had, Page and Lee and Lincoln had used. But there had been a lot of criticism of their findings, and what this book and what this entry is showing is that the Byrom collection and the Byrom collection geometric drawings were included in their findings of interpretation, that their list could not be wrong, because they had researched things and were using quotes that were not relevant to the Byrom collection, and the Byrom collection must be a source that they can use as a support to their for their findings. And I was very surprised to see this, actually, because it seemed as though the book was using my work as a verification of their own justification in some of their findings. And I felt very, very honoured to find that out, actually. And so I then queried how this book had been assembled, and I spent a lot of time with it, and I noticed that the foreword was by Nicholas Haywood, a diplomat of the Priory of Zion. So, and he had written a foreword to this book, and I studied it very, very, very carefully. And what he says in the foreword is he was described as a diplomat and a member of the Priory of Zion, and he assured in his foreword that people had to be elected into that secret society. And he also then, in the body of the book, he does explain how membership can be acquired, and the summary of the history of the Priory of Zion going back centuries. And it would appear that it goes under different names at different stages, and one of the titles was the Rosy Cross, and the Rosy Cross in Paris was headed by Josephine Péladan at that time. And I found this singularly supportive and very, in a way, dependable, because it appeared that he was invited to do this as a very responsible member of society. So who was he then? So in the end of the towards the end of the book, it does say that he was a member, although his name was Nicholas Haywood, he was a member of the St. Aubin family. That's where his roots were, and that intrigued me, because I knew that the St. Albans family had connections with St. Michael's Mount in the south of England. And so I then looked for a history of this Nicholas Haywood. I wanted to know more about him. I did manage to trace his father, and I managed actually to find out the following. His father was Harold Haywood, otherwise Sir Harold Haywood. And I did manage to get a copy of his death certificate, and I'm going to read you a partial quote of how he is described on his own death certificate. His occupation: Royal Family Personal Assistant, Knight Commander of the Victorian Order, Order of the British Empire, and Deputy Lord Lieutenant of Greater London. And then his address is given. And he died in 2010. And his son, Nicholas Andre Haywood, is described as the informant of this information. And then his address is given, and he then signs it as Nick. And I had noted that he was referred to in the Priory of Zion, inside the Priory of Zion, as Nick. And so he was really an interesting character to me. And later, what did I find? He was invited to the wedding of the Prince and Princess of Wales, Kate and William. I know it's the same Nick because in the foreword of the Inside the Priory book, he calls himself NIC, and on the death certificate of his father, although his full name is given, he signs himself NIC. So it's the same Nick. And here we have him at the wedding of Prince William and Kate. Now, the 29th of April was just 3 weeks later than I published my book, The Hidden Chapter, that we've been using illustrations for in the graveyard of St. Michael's Church. It's just 3 weeks later than that. And here we have this Nick attending the wedding of Prince William and Kate. I'm repeating that a few weeks later than this book first appeared in the public domain. Now, he wasn't attending it with his father, Harold Haywood. Why? Because his father had died less than a year before. So his father died in 2010. And here we have Nicholas attending the wedding of Prince William and Kate. So he must have been attending there in his own right. And of course, that it was very, very meaningful to me, especially since his father's occupation was in association with some responsible job that he was carrying out for the King, Charles III. He was Prince of Wales at that time, but nevertheless, as the Prince of Wales, Harold Haywood was carrying out a very responsible job for him. And here we have this Nick as the, I suppose I should say, the adopted son of this Harold. And because he was a member of his own, and it's mentioned in the inside of the Priory book that he was a member of the St. Alban family. And so this presented me with another in-house, very close association with timing and named people with my research, because my own book had come out in at the beginning of April in the same year, and Harold had died. Harold Haywood, Sir Harold Haywood, I must call him officially by that proper title, had died in 2010. So I think I've shared quite a lot with you today, and some of it I've only been able to draw the strands together a little bit at a time over the years. But what it is saying to me is that Tintern is a very, very special place. And it's a special place in all its beauty, and it has been very carefully preserved through time, and long may it do so. And I hope you've enjoyed some of this, and until the next time, bye-bye.